Welcome to Ramblings of a Madman. This episode is a continuation of the previous episode where we talked about equality and equity. We talked about the history and the strides that we have made compared to the history to make an equal society for everybody. In that, we say that humanity can be happy about the strides that they have made about equality, and this equality that is created carves a path for equity in the human society. But the next part, this episode we are going to talk about is the problems that occurs when equality turns into equity. Though humanity has made great strides to make an equal society, it is struggling to make equity in society. I think the reason for this is simple. Because we talked about the inequality in the past, to correct it, it was a simple thing. Change constitutions, change laws, change the way of thinking, and you end up with an equal society where everybody is treated equal. In the past episode, we talked about in the equalness that we have gained, and the problem there is in society at the moment, that different societies, different races, different genders, different countries start their journey from different places. Though they have equal rights, equality in this society at present, they are not in a level playing field when starting this journey. And to make it a level playing field, we talked about that the society is moving towards equity. But moving into equity creates problems. It is easy to move to equality. Nobody have to lose anything. There will be an increase in competitiveness, but people who were already had advantages has nothing to lose. But when coming into equity, people who have a head start have to do some sacrifices, and that is the problem when implementing equity, because it seems the concept itself, it seems fair and very powerful. When implementing in the practical world, there are many problems that many people face. One of the examples can be the South African farmland issue, where in South Africa, the government has decided to take farmland from white farmers. This is, of course, to bring in equality or equity and justify the horrible past in the apartheid era and before. But leaving the complications and the political agendas aside, we can look at the action that is being taken. In one hand, one could argue these farmers are owning land that were taken without consent, with force, and in the past their older pre-generations had advantages over other ethnicities, and this farmland ownership is there because of that. But if you look from the side of those farmers, a farmer is normally in the society is not a politically powerful or extremely wealthy person, and these people was not even alive at that period. Could be even if they were alive, they were not in a position to change things, or they were children or very young. And they might argue, why should I make a sacrifice if I have done nothing wrong? It could be these people might not be racist. These people, it's in the same way that I talked about the history where you are born into your race or you're born into your caste. You will be wealthy or poor depending on your birth. Same thing can be applied here. They might argue they were born into this. They don't practice these hateful criminal activities that the apartheid, the racism that was there, and these horrible things, but they are not willing to give up their land or wealth or the method of their income. But the only way to justify this racism, not the only way, but one of the ways to justify this racism and the harshness, the inequality, is to give ownership of land to the people who the land is taken from. So the argument goes both ways. This is the same thing when slaves were given freedom in United States. Equality was given, but when coming into equity, to give ownership of land and give the power of give political power or something, people, it was a slow move. And because it is basically to make it equity, if you want to give land to the people who were suppressed, you have to take the land from people who already have land, and they wouldn't like to give up their properties and their wealth. This was the problem. See, giving equality, like, yes, giving the right to own land is given because there's no sacrifice in that part, but to give land itself, now that is much different, because there will be sacrifice involved. There will be a loss to the people who have it. And after few hundred years, if you ask a person of this generation to sacrifice what they have for equity, they will ask the question, why should I give up my property or my wealth or whatever that is important to that person to justify others? He or she or the people will say that they are not racist, they are not acting on bigotry, they treat everybody equally, but giving up what they own is a problem. And in the other side of the spectrum is a set of people who are driven into poverty, because in an equal world, though they can have the rights to own property, they didn't have the wealth or the money to buy property in the first place in the beginning, thus driving them into poverty more and more. And to justify that, we can give them a boost by giving ownership of property as a compensation. But this is the problem itself, because to create equity in the practical world, there have to be some sacrifices made. And because if to make equity to some, then it will be unequal to some other person. To give equity to some people, there will be unequalness to the others. Think for feminism. Women were suppressed, and for them to have a chance to come up, we have to create special circumstances where women will have the capability to propel up the ladder. A small example, this is a small example for a complicated scenario, but a small example would be, if there are 5 people in a boardroom, in a director's board, maybe giving 2 seats for women, right? This is just an example in a complicated situation, just getting a simple, minute example. Now think about it. If there were 2 men who are fully qualified for that job, they have to lose that position to give that position to 2 women who are also equally qualified. But in this instance, to create equity, we have given the women the chance, and specifically the men will not get that chance. This is the problem at the moment. Though there are, for example, there are people who says, yes, equality is okay, giving a chance to women to climb up the ladder, but people who are up the ladder itself will not look forward to waiting for the women to catch up with the men. If you take sexism into count, is it the problem is, if you go and if that person who is a man who have already climbed so up in the chain, he might be a good fellow, he might be a good feminist, but is it fair to ask him to stay still while rest of others catch up to him? This is a complicated scenario. It is when coming into racism, when coming into feminism, or when coming into everything else. Let's put, because these are sensitive issues, let's put individualism and this racism and feminism aside, and let's look at countries. For example, if you ask from countries like United Kingdom, France, or any other European country who had colonization in their favor, tell them to wait, or tell them to lose, or tell them to pay their wealth back to the countries they took from, to make equity and to bring all the economies together, they will not support such a motion. Though in practice and in reality, all European countries United Kingdom support the notion of bringing economies up. Even countries that were under colonization, they would like to see economic growth of those countries, and they will support it. And history has proven that they have done projects to support the economic growth of those countries. But the special advantage that European countries and UK had, when free trade came into action, they will not let it go, because as soon as it happens, their economies will start suffering, and that itself, the whole countries will start suffering, and that is not a position that those countries, those societies want to go. They wouldn't mind being an equal playing field, but to give equity, they are not willing to make the economic sacrifices. We cannot blame those countries for not making that sacrifice. But then the question lies, how to make equity for those countries who suffered immensely from colonization. The wealth, power, property that they lost, how can they get it back? This is the problem there is when coming into individual level, or when coming into societal level, or when coming into the whole globe, where countries compete for economic dominance. In a free trade, equal opportunistic world, giving equity means that problems occur. And these are real practical problems too, because think about it, to create equity, let's say we gave advantage to a poor country, or a third world country, or developing country. Now the term that they use is a developing country. It gives an economic advantage and give all the rights of selling one good to them. There are already factories around the world who will face bankruptcy on that particular product, and they will not accept this. So if you take it, lives are in stake when such equities are implemented. Economies are in stake. So it's not very easy to look at it. Justifying the I don't know the examples that I gave are very clear or very proper, but it is the same thing in that is there. If you look at the Black Lives Movement and the feminism movement and other movements, protest, uh, requests and demands of the society is for equity, to create equality. This is the matter in hand at the moment, but it is a very complicated topic because we started equality in an unequal world, and we are trying to give equity to that from that unequalness. So is this a thing that can be uh, sought out? My mind runs to the very first example I gave in the previous episode to describe the equality and equity difference. The famous picture where three people looking over a tall fence and only the tallest person can see, and to make it equal everybody gets a box to climb on, but it doesn't affect everybody in the similar way. The end result is not equal to everybody, but giving more boxes for the shortest person and a medium amount of boxes to the middle height person will help them to see above the fence equally as the tall person. Of course, this example is a beautiful way of explaining, and it's a beautiful concept. Equality and equity, especially when coming into equity, it's a very beautiful, fair concept. But trying to implement it in this society where the beginnings were not even equal at all, it's going to be a very difficult task. So I am not in a position, or I'm not expert enough to give a definitive answer that is for sociologists to give an answer on, but I feel that time is going to be the answer, because as in the previous episode, as we discussed, it's that we haven't spent a lot of time compared to history on equality itself. We are just starting. Therefore, time would be the answer. We haven't still even properly implemented equality. If you see around the world, different societies use different systems which still doesn't come under a proper standard of equality, and humanity is still struggling to find proper equality ways, laws, ways of ruling politics, ways of distribution of wealth. We are still searching for answers without hurting anyone or any person, trying to help another person without trying to destroy one society, one way of life, trying to help the other society, another way of life, and that is a complicated thing to do. So end of the day, I think we are moving, as a society at in a correct way. We are shouting, we are creating a fuss, we are uh, in a bad mood about this, but it's resulting in a good cause. The ideology is already seated, and maybe not this generation, maybe not the next generation, maybe after few generations ahead, the fruits of this seed will definitely will be there for the taking if things go in the right way. Of course, history has a cruel way of playing with time, but it seems the way things are going right now, this could be the answer, because so much of history, if you take of human civilization, has been unequal, unfair, and tragic, where even equity is not to be even seen, or it's not even in dreams of some philosophers. So I think it would be safe to say that the new path that the civilization has taken to go in the themes of freedom, equality, equity, individual freedom, individuality, these things are new to the civilization as a civilization. So we have to figure them out, and to figuring things out, humanity takes a long time. It took more than 5,000 years to get to this stage, so we cannot expect in the time that is the new concepts are implemented for maybe 300 years maximum. So time, we have to wait, we have to be patient, we have to keep pushing. I think that is the way, the only way the wounds will be healed. Equality and equity will be there after that, because if we can go through this equalness in this society for another 3 or 4 generations, in 200-300 years, things will flat out and everybody will have an equal starting point if everything goes in a positive way. We cannot predict the future, that is for sure, because maybe in a future year somebody will be listening to this and being livid with me about saying everything will be fine. We don't know. Either somebody might be looking at laughing at me saying everything is fine right now. That could be also a possibility. Well, whatever it is, I think for my crazy head, it seems like time is the only solution. So I think enough rambling for this topic for now. Equality and equity. In this episode, I looked at a different side of equality and equity, because last episode we looked at how we can be happy as a society, as a civilization, for the progress we have made. But to make more progress, in this episode I looked at the sour side of it. I hope it made an impression in your head to act positively in this world. So goodbye for this episode. Have a safe day, a healthy day. Goodbye. Aibuan.